This is Caffeinated Risk, the monthly podcast for security professionals by security professionals, focused on the principles of enterprise security risk management, exploring technology and business management issues and how they relate to information security risk. Now here are your hosts, Tim McCreate and Doug Leese.
Profanity included.
TCP, go learn your TCP IP MOUSE shit.
Yeah.
But learn engineering principles.
Yes.
And so that's my first question, because
See, the tie-in is perfect, right?
Just comes
like
right
almost
back
like I
at ya.
scripted it. I didn't try that. It just sort of worked out. But it's a thing when we have a guest, and thank you so much for joining us. I Googled the people to see what they've written, not
Oh, dear God.
are there images of them uncompromised. I don't look for that. I don't care. I've done enough forensic response on laptops. There's nothing I haven't seen.
I don't know. I've done some dancing on top of file cabinets at Cisco, and
Jeez.
I've done some stuff.
Pretty tame. That's good.
Pretty
Yeah.
tame. Yeah, I mean, all PG rate. Well, that's not true either. Okay, never mind.
But I did find the book. I'm not sure how recent it is. I didn't check the copyright.
2014, it came out.
Clearly, nothing's been fixed yet, so it's still a very current book.
I hate, you know what I said in the book, in the intro, and in the last chapter, do not let it stand that some psychology chick has written the book on privacy engineering.
Yeah. But I think the term privacy engineering was what sort of dialed me in, because it seems that's the buzzword over the last couple of years. If you tack engineering onto something, then it must be better. But then when you look up the definition of engineering, it is better if you do it that way. That's like,
Yes, that's why we called it that. It was actually a pun. You know, there was privacy by design, Canadian.
Yes, remember that well. Yes.
Born in Canada.
Yeah.
And it's policy, you know, it's like, it's these great outcomes, be win-win, you know, build it in, don't bolt it on, all this stuff. And yet the engineers are like, that's so sweet. Like, bye. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
So instead
Your mom
we were
must be proud. Yeah.
and it's the engineers we have to loop in.
Exactly.
I'm only on chapter 2.
You've already read my bad poetry, so it only goes up from there.
Okay, good. So that's great. You know, as I was looking at it, that one quote that stuck out was the intent of privacy engineering is to close the gap between privacy policy and the reality. And I it's like, wow, that could have been in highlights and blinky tags. The reality of systems or technology or processes. How does it really work?
Exactly.
And so how would somebody actually go about identifying the gaps between the policies and the systems from a real world thing? And yes, I see your fingers tapping. It's like, you're on.
Yeah.
Like,
Bring it to me, Doug. Bring it to me.
how would a real person like me do that?
Yeah, well, you could hire me.
Buy the book. Yes. Number 1.
Buy the book.
Yeah.
Yep.
Read
You can buy
it.
the
Number
book.
2.
You can get it for free even, because we wanted to make sure we could give it to government officials who were like, you're so naughty. You should just, literally, I had a sitting congresswoman say to me, pointed her finger in my face and said, you're hiding the easy button. And I was like, what are you talking about, ma'am? And she said, big corporations are hiding the ability to delete our activity that we don't want online, and you're just hiding it so that you can hoard this data. And I was like, darling, can I call you darling as a sitting congresswoman? I wish that I was hiding the easy button, because I'd be in Tahiti phoning this in right now, because I'd be selling said easy button. Secondly, if you try to figure out what the soft system actually is in any corporation, including the ones that are purportedly bringing you informational services, and I guarantee you that just getting their arms around what is data is a novel concept here in our, you know, our Lord's year of 2021. So there's no easy button. And so to bring it all the way back to how do we take this, where's the easy button, and this notion of I don't know what you're doing, but I think it's unfair, but I still can't quit you because I like, the blinking lights and colors and photos and stuff. Like, bring it to me, please, but stop betraying me. I'm hurt. So it's like, we can either like give our users therapy, which they probably desperately need. We can fire all the CEOs, which probably would help too, and bring in the youngsters who grew up as digital natives. Or we could maybe talk to some of the folks that are like Grace Hopper era and like look at COBOL and say, okay, how did we initially, when it was hard to sling code, how did we know what to do when you had one shot with punch cards? Well, you went to the COBOL situation, and COBOL was really an incantation of business rules and outcomes. So if you haven't got your business rules and outcomes sorted out, nothing magical is going to happen when you're taping things together and putting blinky lights. And, if you put a good acronym and a .2.0 on it, it's going to work, of course. No, if you say that you want to have privacy, well, we ought to probably break that down.
Yeah.
So first thing we do is we define it functionally as not encryption. It's not secrecy. Mm-hmm. It's not a mood. It's not like an opinion. Privacy can actually be functionalized. And I view it as actually a soft system of flow that is the authorized processing of personal and personally identifiable, an ever expanding class, according to moral, that's squishy, ethical, squishy too, legal, a little less squishy, and sustainability, including can your systems do it? Does your culture do it? And is this something that's going to make you enough money so you don't go out of business pretending to be the most righteous idiot in the village?
Right.
So when you break that down into like a functional requirements document, the toughest part, of course, is arguing out in advance what your level of, let's leave off morality for a moment. Like, before 2020, I would have said this is a really easy conversation.
I was going to ask, when does that come back into the discussion? But that's another podcast, right? So,
but let's think about ethics, and I apologize to any real philosophers out there. Ethics are really like, what is, if you go to a marketing person, you say, what is your brand? Mm-hmm. They bring out all these crazy psychological, anthropological terms. It's cool, it's convenient, it's safe, it's innovative. All of these kind of ushy words. So we're operating in an ushy world, even if we're talking about engineering solutions. If you get enough of that brand ethic together, you can say, we're known for sharing things. We're known for being a quote unquote safe place. And then you figure out, what are the sustainability? So it sounds quite complex the way I'm laying it out, but actually, again, go back to Grace Hopper.
Yeah.
Information is more valuable than the hardware that processes it.
Right. 100%.
Why aren't we putting it on the balance sheet? That was in 1965, she said that. Let's assume that, like currency, when information flows through your systems, your partners, your users, your employees, whoever, that you as an entity want to observe when you've got it, understand what it means. If I'm babysitting a child, it's different than I'm babysitting someone's pair of shoes. And then how am I going to act over time? And then what if I was good at it? So what if Facebook, for example, and there's wonderful privacy professionals there if you're listening now, it's not about you. Like, we'll talk later. I still love you. However, what if Facebook's business model was based on the fact that a lot of us that are still hanging in there with them, we like it because I'm a nice Catholic girl. I've got billions of Finnerans all over the world. I cannot email them, call them, text them, proton mail them, WeChat them enough. So I like Facebook because I can put my pictures of my family there. To me, they're relatively sensitive information, but it's a format that is understood by a certain people of a certain age. So now I look at it from Facebook and go, okay, I started out as girls being rated by horny boys at Harvard. that's no longer your demo. Most of those guys are too tired to do that anymore. And now you're talking about your demo is like chicks like me, like middle-aged people in search of Botox and connection. So what does that mean? If I wanted to curate that as my brand, that means that there's like some level of interest and friction of asserting my rights. There's some level of, hey, that's neat. How did they know I liked those shoes? Oh my God.
Yeah.
And then there's another one saying, I would really be genuinely hurt and dismayed and shocked, I say, if I found out that a dark pattern was trying to influence the way that I was behaving politically in the world or being delivered information about, anything. So all of those things become requirements, and you don't have to get as sort of ethereal as I've sort of went. It's like over caffeinated podcast. But when you break things down in that way, they become systems, they become inputs, processing, outputs, and records keeping and time management. And when you look at all of that over time, that's really the heart of the Privacy Engineers Manifesto. The technical piece was really inserted by my dad, who started, in the U.S. Navy on mainframes. I grew up on a raised floor, once playing with punch cards.
So did we. Yep. So did we. Yeah. That was my favorite, right? Because I could follow the security by the cable I grabbed onto.
Exactly. And now we really have to start to rein in like tangible software codes. And to most developers' credit, because I'm spending a ton of my time now, my software business is focused on developers actually building privacy engineered systems with requirements that are understood, documented, and actually reflected in those policies that companies are putting out there. It's almost like a building code, if you would. Now we're starting to recognize like security is super important. Like if I have a liquid, I don't want it to leak. And I want it to come in from one place and go out another. Privacy says that liquid is acid in a lab. Now your security protocols fall out from the why we're here in the first place, the content. So your architecture has to be involved, your coders have to be involved, your security has to be involved, and contextual management has been left out of the game. So all of the really cool crypto guys have been so exciting for us to watch, but now it's sort of like, that's great. Can we please apply this to an outcome that we can agree upon is in line with our brand, in line with our gut check, if we don't want to say morality, and certainly in line with most, if not all, of the laws that are coming out.
Like the approach that we're taking now, we've been talking about this for like a decade or more, and it's this whole concept of enterprise security risk management. And we talked about that in our podcast when we were at the Smart Markets, and this is what we're basing the premise of all things that we do here on Caffeinated Risk is a risk-based approach. But how do you, in your role, like, so now let's put you back into Privatist, the consulting role, and now you're going out to meet a client.
Yep.
How do you get them to focus on that risk that is privacy that they literally have no clue on or couldn't give a damn or don't understand it? How do you educate that level to start looking at things, the two parallel camps? Well, we got a privacy officer, and I don't know what the hell they do every day, but they're over here doing stuff. And I know Tim and his team are spending money on firewalls, so we must be secure.
Exactly.
Where do you draw the link between the two and get the folks with the money and the pen to go, wait a second, right? So no, that was my big question for the evening, and I'm good after this one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that question could go on for a long time, right? And it's exactly right. It's when you talk about risk, if you aren't talking about context, you're not really talking about risk. I am simply one of your contexts. So if what you want to do is sell more product, you've got a supply chain risk. You want the raw materials. You've got a risk that your employees don't know how to build it or you don't have the right equipment. You've got a risk that you aren't going to know who. We get that privacy gal in here. Who is my customer? What do they want? Oh, wanting things. Oh, that sounds like preference. Get those identity people back in here to do this risk. And then once you've had this conversation about what is it that we want to go do in regular real people terms, like everyone take your I'm the smartest person in the room hat off. When you're talking about risk, it's like, what do we have to gain? And what do we have to lose? And I think, Tim, I think you and I were talking about the concrete hole problem. So if you approach the world, and many security people, not you guys, but many, approach the world like there's a concrete hole. Oh my God, does everyone know that there's a concrete hole?
She's kind of, there she goes, she dropped it off. I think she froze, her Wi-Fi kept dropping off.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, she'll just jump back on and we can finish it. But I know where she's going with the concrete hole, right? So.
Yeah, the bit I was picking up was that we're fascinated almost by the problem.
Oh, yeah. I think that's part of the issue, is that we get so absorbed by the problem statement, we forget that we need to look at the more practical approach. And, for you and I, when we look at it from that risk lens, it's asking those business questions. Like Michelle brought up this great point that I need to collect preference, that I do want those shoes, or I'm looking for a second lawnmower. So, so how do I do that? How do I accurately bring in that conversation, that concept? And then how do I record that safely and securely and following legislative requirements from a privacy perspective? But also, now I bring in the whole ethics and the moral stuff too, is that's where we now as professionals, isn't that part of our job to ask those discussions or have those discussions with our executives and our app development teams and our sales folks and our operations folks to get them thinking along the same lines? And I love that idea, is where's the user in the equation? Who's the person that you're targeting when you're doing all of this work, right?
Yeah, well, and I think it was summed up best by that statement, you lost the plot.
Yeah. Yeah, you lost. Yeah. We're not the only ones. We're not the only ones looking at this going, wow, I'm going to take this massive chunk of data and sort through it and find that Doug wants to buy a second lawnmower. That already happens, right? That stuff already happens. Hey, she's back.
I think I'm back.
That's okay. We just assigned all the homework to you, so, you're good.
That's fine. I was off of your paper anyway.
Yeah, we were just talking a little bit about the various elements that are in the data mining. And I think just before Xfinity helped improve my editing abilities in advance.
I think I was on a roll about something.
That's right. Yeah, you're great. So I'm going to grab that. But it was more about what is that toxic data within the design process that we should be on the watch for?
Yeah, I think it is. It's like there's an old comic. I can't remember what his name. I think it was George Carlin, who said, my stuff is stuff and your stuff is shit.
Yeah.
So you have to think about first whose perspective. So the critical information for me is my home address and my bodily integrity and whatever. The critical systems information, how well is the system running? Do we know it's running well? So once you've assigned your personas of users, then you can start to assign your risk assessment for the likelihood of harm and the likelihood that it's going to work out. And I think we often forget the likelihood that it's going to work out column, because it could be that you put a whole lot of work in and there's only a tiny percentage of chance that this is going to be helpful, useful, or interesting.
Right. Okay.
So I think you have to look at that risk profile to answer your question in long form. It's like, what's the downside for each of the users, each of the people described? And then what is the likelihood that the insights that you're going to gain, whether they are in the aggregate, because you're looking at predictive, one-to-manys, that it has high fidelity, that it's high quality, that it is usable, and that it's not just an ephemeral moment of the data about when it's going to rain tomorrow is only really relevant to me, probably before tomorrow, because once it's in tomorrow and I'm standing there without my umbrella, who cares? I know it's raining.
Yeah.
And to tie it back to risk, what is the real impact? I mean, there are only certain days of your whole life where standing in the rain without an umbrella might truly be a traumatic incident.
Right.
The rest
Right.
of the time, it's just kind of inconvenient. Maybe this is the better question. How do we put ourselves in with that user context if we are a developer?
Right.
Yeah.
How do I understand that? Is the answer bringing in people like yourself that are aware of different nuances and they've made this a study, what certain cultures find offensive and all of the rest of it? Or
I've done a lot of field studies on offending many, many people. I find, at the end of the day, like there's a common denominator of like poop and underwear are funny everywhere. But to your point of how are they going to know, it's really important because while I do think a more diverse type of person is drawn to the developer kind of community and world, the reality is that if you are that kind of a problem solver and you're that kind of a tinkerer, you may not be, you may be more directionally focused rather than horizontally environmentally focused. So it may just be that we can't go in and ask someone to be something fundamentally that they're not. So that's sort of like oh no, poor developers. And it presupposes that they're not human beings like the rest of us. If you can't talk to your developers about these human needs and requirements, encourage them to go have hobbies. I guarantee you they'll come back and they'll be fine. But the real answer is, how do we actually break down requirements into their language? So they shouldn't have to be trying to get the Android version of a guest mode shopping requirement that was handed out by the PRC this summer. Understand why that might hit the Uyghurs and that might hit the shoppers and that might hit the supply chain of the retail outlets. And, if we did, then unfortunately what we would have is a whole lot of not code because we have people's heads kind of exploding. So what you need to do is you need to say, okay, the requirement is if we've decided to allow shoppers to browse, and I'll put anonymously in air quotes because I think de-identification is adorable and it's so cute. I'd love everyone who thinks that DID is the goal. That's cute. However, back here in the real life, if we want to say that a shopper should be able to pick up on, we get more specific for these folks, right? On an iPhone, on Android, and on web. Now you've got 3 different distinct teams with 3 different distinct styles and likes and careabouts. So now you say, okay, for the iPhone folks, as a user, you start speaking in the language of Agile. As a user, I want to be able to pull down images and not have cookies or tracers or any sort of traceability. Now I'm getting back out of my developer speak, but you get the drift. Yeah. And then what does that imply for the rest of the supply chain of requirements? Yeah. So instead of saying, make sure it's safe, you can say, we want to have a policy that says within 10 minutes, we're going to overwrite. Yeah. And that comes from the archive people. And from the billing people, once that turns into a sale, we want to, as a user, I want the option to let them know that when I'm purchasing something, I want them to know my history so that they can serve me better. Yeah. So that makes the time. And so each of these sub-requirements in Agile user stories become the way that we communicate in their language. And then they're not looking at what were all of these requirements that went down the chain while we were creating, because I guarantee you there's going to be, should we do this or this? Well, we've got this. Yeah. And each developer shouldn't be creating your archive. Your system should. And your system right now is a product manager or a program manager. And those are the folks that really are the crux of it all. And like law. So when I was a lawyer, there was nothing about leadership. There was nothing about risk management. It was all about case law and writing well and presenting an argument. Same thing for developers. Some of our developers grow up to be project managers or, God forbid, vice presidents. Along the way, we haven't talked to them about you're not just an older, better paid developer, but you become the expected I'll put leader in like capital letters with neon lights, you are the leader of that team. And so you now have to switch your head off of, I like to tinker with things and watch them get built, to, gosh, when something gets built, what are the materials required? When do we turn it off? Is this UNIVAC? Has this turned into a weapon?
Yep.
Again, I'm way overgeneralizing, so apologies to my technical brothers and sisters out there. But you also then have to do this thing of like human confrontation. You have to say, I think you're wrong.
Yeah.
And you have to say it a lot. Most of my career in privacy has been confronting very powerful white men. People. And so
Yep.
you're wrong. And it's not because it's written in the laws that you're wrong. It's because the law that they'll build tomorrow when they catch you doing it.
And there's parallels to the security world too, right? Like when we look at, and so not the security world from 30, 40 years ago when I first started in the gig, but now, right?
Yeah.
Now it's the change now. Yeah, I just dated myself. Sorry, folks. Now that element that we look at now is once we get to the point where we've sat with the business, looked at the requirements, and I continue to ask every time I get into a role or when I take on a leader position, go talk to the client. And your client is not sitting across from you, and the client is not the guy running the server. The client is a person at the far end of that keystroke, is the one we got to talk to. And that's where you begin with that. And then you reverse engineer everything back from the point of the convenience of having my credit card securely stored in a location where it can't be grabbed, where my preferences match to that account for me, that I've anonymized that information so that, but when it does come back to me, it's Tim buying that second lawnmower. That's what we need to get to. And I think now that we're into this space where we're forced to think that way, it's interesting to see those who haven't moved along with that path and the struggles that they're having when, what do you mean I got to go talk to the privacy officer? Yes, they're part of the project team. Bring them in. For God's sake, they're part of the team.
And I think you're absolutely right, Tim. It's like we have evolved because we've had to. The complexity of our jobs are far too difficult to think about a firewall keeping anything out but, like your grandma.
Yeah. So I got to ask this question, and we do this with all of our guests, and it's we try. No, it's a good one actually. It's not a bad one, and it's really: is there a point of diminishing return?
Absolutely.
Where we're looking at it from that perspective of risk, security, and privacy. Where is that point of that diminishing return, and how do you advise the business that you're there, or you're not going to get any more out of this? You can't beat this mule any harder, folks. We're done here, right? So is there, when you get to that point, how do you manage that discussion, or how do you get them across the line with you so that they have that same perspective at the end of it?
Yeah, this is tough because it goes both ways. So there's a point of diminishing returns if you are compliance minded and you're trying to balance the needs, wants, and cultures of 7 billion souls on the planet. For most of the connected world today believes that privacy is a human right. So to say that this is risk-based, to say that there's a trade-off, to say that you're compromising, for some people, they just can't get that in line with it's a human right, but it's a shared community. So you see a lot of burnout in that way in that community. So there is a point of diminishing returns where if you can't get past that right, go and work for an advocacy law firm and sue people for the really egregious things, because corporate life is just going to kill you.
Yeah.
On the other side, it is there is diminishing return to collect information just because, or because you want to make your data models prettier. I guarantee you, if you focus on the efficiency, effectiveness, and quality of your data now, then all of those, we just collected it because we weren't sure, and maybe we'd have insights, and I'm not that secret, and I'm not that different. Like, I'm a middle-aged soccer mom. You can collect all the data you want. I'm not Lola, who used to be a showgirl. I'm just this. So stop getting exotic with your data. It's probably just a horse and not a zebra.
Yes.
And so by collecting so much more and creating more risk on the security side and on your brand side and your morality side, you're getting a diminishing returns of data as well.
Well, thank you for being here and thank you for being with us. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Yeah, thank you for putting up with my Wi-Fi. I daren't move to turn the lights on because I was like, okay, we're on. I'm not going anywhere.
No, that's all good.
Thanks for listening to the latest podcast from Caffeinated Risk. Make sure you visit our website, caffeinatedrisk.com, to stay up to date on what we've been working on. Our website has bios of our podcast guests, posts about topics we're passionate about, and even a library of reference material we find valuable in the work we do every day. And don't forget to subscribe to Caffeinated Risk on your favorite podcast service. This way, you'll be notified when we release our next podcast, and you can listen to our previous guests just in case you missed them. Thanks so much for listening to Caffeinated Risk.